Hello, and welcome to How It Works, Vision and the Brain. From light waves to so much more. Vision begins when light waves bounce off of an object and enter the eyes. Let's take a look inside the eye. Structures inside the eye work together to refract and focus light from the eye's visual target onto the retina at the back of the eye. Specialized cells in the retina, called rods and cones, convert the focused image into electrical signals. From here, millions of ganglion cells send these signals along the optic nerve to the brain. The visual pathway. Beyond the eye, electrical signals travel the visual pathway to the brain. Let's take a closer look. Leaving the eye. Traveling the optic nerve. Millions of ganglion cells join together in the optic nerve head and exit the eye as the optic nerve. Crossing paths at the optic chiasm. The two optic nerves, one from each eye, cross over one another at a junction called the optic chiasm. Putting it all together, this crossing of nerve fibers sends the image seen on the right side of both eyes to the left side of the brain, and vice versa. This lets us see in 3D. On to the visual cortex. Travel along the optic tracts. Nerve fibers exit the optic chiasm in two bundles called the optic tracts, which carry the nerve signal to the lateral geniculate bodies, LGN, of the thalamus, passing through relay stations. The LGN relay information in separate layers to the next set of nerve cells, the optic radiations. Each layer will carry a different kind of information to specialized parts of the brain. Next stop, the visual cortex. The optic radiations curve through the brain, carrying information from the LGN to the brain's primary visual cortex, V1, in the brain's occipital lobe. Seeing with the brain. Each of the brain's four lobes plays a role in how and what we see. Let's take a closer look. The occipital lobe is the processing center of visual information. It is responsible for image processing in area V1, image information relay to other lobes in area V2, form perception, area V3, color perception, area V4, and motion perception, area V5. Next, we have the temporal lobe, picture library and visual reference center. The temporal lobe provides a library of shapes and objects, long-term visual memories, analysis of sensory input, image recall, and facial recognition. Next, we have the parietal lobe, the integrator of sensory information and executor of movement. The parietal lobe helps us to locate objects, 3D map the surrounding environment in our minds, processing details of a visual scene, visual guidance of movement, and overall provides an unconscious framework for movement. Finally, we have the frontal lobe, thinker, planner of movement, and behavioral control center. The frontal lobe allows us to move our head and eyes, track objects, provides emotional control, allows us to make choices, and allows us to give visual attention. The flow of information. Information flows from the occipital lobe along two major interconnected pathways that serve the higher visual functions, the dorsal stream and the ventral stream. The dorsal stream, also known as the Ware pathway. The dorsal stream flows from the occipital lobe through the posterior parietal and frontal lobes to unconsciously bring about visual guidance of movement, search, and attention. This allows us to move the hands, body, feet, and legs, find our way through crowded areas, find a person in a large group of people, or spot a distant target. The ventral stream, also known as the What pathway, the ventral stream flows from the occipital lobe through the temporal lobes to bring about image recognition and conscious function. This stream allows our innate ability to route find, allows us to recognize colors, objects, words, and letters, allows us to understand facial expressions, and recognize people. But what happens when damage occurs? Any damage to the brain that affects the use of vision is known as a neurological visual impairment, or NVI. NVI is an umbrella term that encompasses cerebral visual impairment and cortical visual impairment, both abbreviated as CVI. An NVI diagnosis can occur alongside an eye condition, such as glaucoma or nearsightedness, but no ocular diagnosis is needed to identify an NVI. The NVI umbrella. Let's take a closer look. Neurological visual impairment, again, is an umbrella term. Within that, we have cerebral visual impairment. This is caused by disorder or damage to any part of the visual pathways and visual centers in the brain, including the pathways that serve the higher visual functions. Cortical visual impairment, a subcategory of cerebral visual impairment, is caused by disorder or damage related to the cortical areas of the brain, the cerebral cortex and/or the optic radiations. Thank you for joining me to learn a little bit more about how it works, vision, and the brain.